Chapter 7. The Midnight Watch. From behind the heavy velvet draperies, Nancy watched through a tiny parting in the fabric as Mr. Henderson stormed back into his office. He looked completely disheveled, his face pale and slick with sweat. He furiously ransacked his own desk before retrieving a small ring of master keys, shoving them into his pocket, and rushing back out into the corridor, slamming the door behind him. Nancy slipped out from her hiding place, her jaw set. The timeline was collapsing for the desperate manager. With a debt that massive hanging over his head, he was bound to strike again tonight before his bookies came to collect. When midnight arrived, the Brunswick Hotel transformed into a cavern of eerie silence. The grand lobby downstairs was dim, illuminated only by a few low-wattage bulbs near the front desk. Upstairs on the third floor, where the hotel's most affluent guests were staying, the long hallway was lined with thick shadows. Nancy took up her position. She had slipped down the corridor earlier, quietly concealing herself behind a large decorative three-panel parlor screen positioned directly across from the luxury suites. Through the ornate lattice carving of the screen, she had a clear, unobstructed view of the entire wing. Time ticked by. The grandfather clock at the end of the hall chimed 2 o'clock, its deep, resonant tones echoing like a warning. Nancy remained perfectly still, her keen eyes scanning the dim hallway. Then, a floorboard creaked near the service elevator. A tall figure stepped into the hall, moving with practiced, ghostly quiet. The intruder wore a dark woolen overcoat despite the July warmth, with a fedora pulled low to obscure his features. Nancy watched, her breath catching, as the figure stopped directly outside room 312, the suite belonging to a wealthy timber baron from Ontario. The figure reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy ring of brass keys. With terrifying ease, he selected a key, slid it into the lock, and turned it with a soft, metallic click. The door swung open, and the shadowy figure slipped inside, closing the door silently behind him. Nancy waited, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Exactly 4 minutes later, the door reopened. The thief stepped back out into the hallway, carefully locking the door behind him. In his gloved hands, he held a shimmering silver jewelry pouch. As he stepped under the single, faint electric light bulb in the corridor, he paused to tuck the pouch securely into his overcoat pocket. For a brief second, he tilted his head upward, adjusting his hat. The dim light illuminated his face completely. There was no mistaking the sharp jawline, the manicured mustache, and the cold, calculating eyes. It was Mr. Henderson. Nancy's grip tightened on the edge of the parlor screen. The mystery was solved, but the danger was far from over. She needed to follow him to see where he was hiding the stolen loot before she could alert the Moncton police. Slipped out from behind the screen, Nancy followed the manager's retreating shadow down into the depths of the hotel.